The Transformers brand has been dominating the toy aisle since 1984. The simple premise of switching from one toy to another was a novel concept at the time, and Transformers simply did it the best. It had a really strong cartoon and comic book to hook kids into the franchise with its characters and lore. Even though it's been around for 40 years, the Transformers brand is still incredibly strong, and every new entry into the franchise brings new fans into the fold. The latest movie, Transformers 1, introduced a ton of new fans to the franchise, potentially being the biggest influx of new fans since the first Michael Bay movies. I was born in 1996, well after the original cartoon, so I grew up with a totally different set of shows, and have been a fan since I fully understood what a Transformer is. What's good, internet? Jake here, dumb as ever, and I have come to realize that there are a lot of people getting into the Transformers fandom, and with 40 years worth of stories and toys, it probably seems a little overwhelming to get into. Heck, I'm having that experience right now as I'm getting into Kamen Rider, which has been around for 50 years, so that may have inspired this video, which is meant to be an entry-level guide to the franchise, and teach you about the media, toys, and fandom. I'll also point you towards some resources for continued learning, but one thing I'll point you towards right now is the TF Wiki, which is an incredible online resource housing so much information about the franchise. From toys to movies to television to novels, TF Wiki has everything, and I highly encourage new fans to just explore the site. Or if there's a term or character you're confused by, look it up on TF Wiki. I've been reading the site for like 15 years, and I've barely scratched the surface of its content. For my longtime Transformers fans that are watching, I hope you can enjoy this video, and feel free to provide more context or detail in the comments for your favorite parts of the franchise. And if you enjoy this video, please consider liking and subscribing. It will help me defeat the biggest Transformers hater, Algae Rhythm. I'm going to try and give you a range of Transformers media to enjoy, but first we have to pay special attention to the origin point of Transformers, Generation 1 or G1, which technically spans from the first series in 1984 to the end of Beast Machines in 2000. But when people refer to G1 online, they're often talking about the original series, including the movie, which introduced the Transformers to the American public, and is still beloved by fans to this day. Some overzealous fans, who only care about the original cartoon and loudly dismiss anything other than G1, are called G1ers and should be promptly ignored. In my opinion, the entire franchise is what makes Transformers so special, and I do think G1 is very important. If it's your favorite part of the franchise, I have no ill will towards you, but I will draw the line at making other fans feel bad for liking later parts of the franchise. G1 gave us a lot of iconic characters, quotes, and moments that have echoed throughout the franchise, like Optimus Prime and Megatron's rivalry, the Matrix of Leadership, One Shall Stand, One Shall Fall, are all very important to the franchise and are referenced ad nauseum. Toy-wise, the original Transformers toys are interesting, because they're actually repurposed Japanese toys, using two main lines from Japan called Diaclone and Microchange. Diaclone featured piloted vehicles that turn into robots, which is why the G1 Optimus toy has an empty space in his chest, or why Ironhide has no face. And Microchange featured transforming robots based on everyday objects, which is why Soundwave turns into a cassette deck, or why Megatron turns into a pistol. Yeah, I guess if you didn't know, Megatron in G1 turns into a pistol, which has been a point of contention because what was acceptable in the 80s is sometimes not acceptable today. And since the end of G1, Megatron has not really turned into a gun, and some fans of the franchise kick up a storm about it to this day. Megatron's recognized main alt mode in current day is a tank, though some people, myself included, think he should be a jet or helicopter. The Transformers that turn into objects are an interesting relic of the time, because they would obviously be terrible alt modes if the Transformers want to travel, but it's just part of the lore now. There's a lot of lore to G1 that I can't really get into here, but the main point I'm trying to make is that G1 is important, and it will always be important, as it's a cash cow part of the franchise. And Hasbro can pretty much just make infinite new G1 Optimus Prime toys and still make a profit. While selling toys has always been the main focus of the Transformers, the media from movies to shows to comics are the lifeblood of the fandom. Media is primarily how fans get into the franchise, and it's also what gets fans invested into the world and characters. One of the most interesting things about Transformers is how the franchise constantly reinvents itself, and this is a huge thing new fans seem to get caught up on. When getting into Transformers, you need to understand that most TV shows and universes are completely unconnected. Transformers 1, for example, is its own universe. It exists separately from every other show and movie beforehand, even though it uses familiar ideas like the Matrix of Leadership, and features a bunch of characters that are in other universes. Just like there's a Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and Tom Holland Spider-Man, there's a G1, Armada, and animated Optimus Prime. They're all the same character, but are slightly different depending on the universe, and they can also be really different characters. For example, I grew up with Transformers Armada, which took a lot of names from the original cartoon and gave them to characters that were completely different from the originals, which is very confusing for newer fans. This practice has become less common as the brand has homogenized over the years, but for a long time the brand itself would constantly transform. So let's go over some of the media. I'm just going to mention the media I think is really important or easy to jump into as a fan. So again, if I don't talk about a certain show, go crazy in the comments discussing it. We've already discussed G1, which is quite an old cartoon and it can sometimes feel janky and random. For example, in the first few episodes, the Autobots can inexplicably fly, which is funny because for a lot of universes, Autobots are almost defined by not being able to fly, as it's a Decepticon trait usually. But the show isn't terrible, it's old and clunky, but in my opinion, totally watchable, and it has that good 80s cheesiness. Beast Wars came at a time when the Transformers brand was faltering, and completely reinvented the world of Transformers, though it does technically take place in the G1 universe. This is a show where G1ers really earned their title, as it was so radically different that they were throwing fits on the early internet. Beast Wars was one of the first all 3D shows, so it's a little goofy, but the story is really great, and it feels really mature sometimes, which you don't always get with Transformers. Some noteworthy lore aspects I'll point out is that Beast Wars is technically set in the G1 universe, because the characters from Beast Wars are actually from the far future, and when they crash on Earth, they actually go back in time. So they're on prehistoric Earth at the same time that the G1 Transformers are deactivated on the Ark. So technically, Beast Wars is set before and after G1. Also, the main villain of the show's name is Megatron, but he is a different guy. He just named himself after the original G1 character. Beast Wars was followed by Beast Machines, which introduced a lot of interesting ideas, but most fans found the show and toy line to be a bizarre mess, and it's gained a reputation in the fandom as such. But I've also heard from people who watched the show that it's actually pretty good. So like most things, I think you should form your own opinion. Next was Transformers Robots in Disguise in 2001, which was the first Transformers show outside of the G1 universe. It's a very anime-centric show that featured Optimus Prime as a fire truck for the first time, and it also gave him a super mode, which would become a recurring theme for the next few years of the franchise. I'll also mention that there was a second show called Robots in Disguise. It came out in 2015, but it's completely unrelated to the 2001 show. They just literally have the same name. As a result, people refer to the first show as RID-01, and the second as RID-15. RID-01 is often called a filler show because Hasbro was working on bigger plans during it. And that's fair, but the show is cool and funny, so I recommend it. Next came the Unicron Trilogy, which was made up of 3 different shows that aired from 2002 to 2006. Starting with Armada, which introduced a whole new universe that featured characters with familiar names but were overall completely different characters, from design to personality. Beast Wars had done this as well to some degree, but Armada took it to the next level, and it does feel like they took names out of a hat at random to give these characters. There is a term for this called name swapping, but it doesn't get used much. As a result of this phenomenon, when talking about characters, you often have to attach a prefix to their name. For example, I would say Armada Blur to distinguish I'm not talking talking about G1 Blur. Each show in the Unicron trilogy was highlighted by gimmicks. Armada had mini-cons, small transformers that could power up the bigger transformers. Energon had power links, which involved one character becoming arms while the other became legs. And Cybertron had Cyber Planet keys, which were basically mini-cons but lazier. All three shows feel so disconnected from each other, so don't expect a coherent epic saga or anything like that for the Unicron trilogy. You basically just watch it for the vibes and cool new ideas. Armada was the first Transformers show I really watched as a kid, so I'm pretty nostalgic for it. But I wouldn't say any of these shows are required reading. What is required reading, to me anyway, is Transformers Animated, which is my personal favorite show and by far one of the most popular in the fandom. The show has a very distinctive art style and does a great job of respecting G1 as source material while also coming up with radical new ideas. It really feels like the Transformers equivalent to Ultimate Spider-Man, and the world building is so strong that fans are easily able to continue coming up with the new characters and their own stories. So as a result, Animated has one of the biggest fandoms post G1. Around the same time is when the Transformers movies hit the theaters, and the brand experienced an unprecedented rise in popularity. The Bayverse is the closest thing to G1 in terms of modern day fandom, and there are some fans that truly only care about the movies. Just like G1, I think this is fine as long as you don't put down other parts of the franchise, which of course some do, but we don't have a fancy name for them yet, because unlike G1, the Bayverse has never really gone away. There have been 2 live-action movies since The Last Knight, and Bayverse toys have been on the shelf since the 2007 movie. So the Bayverse has never had their ultimate crybaby moment like the G1ers did with the Beast Wars. And to be clear, I like the first 3 Bayverse movies a lot, so I'm not a hater of the movies by any means. Bumblebee and Rise of the Beasts are the 2 live-action movies that came out after Bay's run, and they're vaguely connected to the Bayverse, mostly because Paramount wants the general audience to think that they're in the same universe, but there's literally nothing connecting the 2 movie continuities, and several points of the new universe lore contradict the Bayverse lore. So really the movies are only connected when executives say they are, while filmmakers completely ignore the Bayverse and tell their own stories. I will say I think Bumblebee is the best Transformers movie to date. I just really like the smaller scale and more personal take. To go along with the Bayverse movies, a new show that fit their vibe called Transformers Prime was created. I actually just started watching the show and I'm enjoying it. Prime fans rival Animated fans in number, and it seems to me like Prime has been getting a big wave of hate after years of praise. This is normal and people will hate on your favorite show no matter how good it is. My advice is to just watch what you like and find like-minded fans. And on the other side of the coin, I advise you to never judge a show by its fandom. Prime is weirdly connected to the War for Cybertron games as well as RID-15 and Rescue Bots, but don't worry, you don't need to engage with any of that to enjoy the show. The other stuff is completely optional and part of a whole can of worms called the Aligned Continuity, but that's more of a Transformers 102 subject. The next notable show after Prime is Cyberverse, which looks extremely low budget and had a depressingly bad toy line, but is actually a pretty decent show that I need to go back and finish, though I'll warn you the first season is rough. By the way, an older toy line was also called Cyberverse, just another example of Hasbro recycling names. After Cyberverse, the Netflix exclusive War for Cybertron trilogy was released over a few years. The show tied in with the amazing new figures Hasbro was producing, and I thought Siege, the first season, was mid, but season 2 and 3, titled Earthrise and Kingdom, were kind of terrible. I think they were trying to make the next definitive Transformers universe, and in my opinion they failed. Earthspark came next, telling a story about Transformers born on Earth called Terrans. The show airs on Nickelodeon and Paramount Plus. I watched the first season and I actually loved it, but I've heard season 2 and 3 are much worse, though I haven't verified this for myself, but that is the recurring opinion of the fandom at large. Everyone thought Earthspark was over after season 3, but leaks are saying that we're getting 2 more specials, so that's something at least. The current cartoon is called Cyberworld, and new episodes are uploaded to YouTube. I watched the first few episodes and is fun, though it feels incredibly disjointed and lacks any sort of context, mostly because the episodes are only 5 minutes long, but they made Megatron a bull, which is pretty neat. So that was a lot of shows, and pro tip, a lot of them are fully available on YouTube through the official Transformers account. But we also have comic books. G1 had a long-running comic book created and published by Marvel Comics that deviated from the show and was essentially its own universe. And since it was back in the day, there were US and UK versions because there was a UK Marvel office. The UK version of the comic went on much longer than the US version, and a lot of iconic storytellers in the franchise are from the UK. In 2005, the comic book publisher IDW gained the Transformers license and began their own Transformers universe, which ran until 2018, an astonishing 13 years, making it one of the longest running Transformers continuities, and took the franchise to so many weird, interesting, and violent corners, as well as introducing new characters and concepts, with the final years of the book being focused on Star Trek-style adventures, following Rodimus, Ultra Magnus, and his crew through space. Trying to read through the entire series is quite a challenge, especially financially because collected editions aren't sold anymore, and old releases run for hundreds of dollars. I can't give any advice regarding how to read these, but if you find a way to, I've linked a reading guide in the description. This series ended in 2018, followed by a rebooted universe in 2019, which was okay but ultimately failed. In my opinion, it was extremely slow for a monthly comic book, and the comic used then current toy designs, which I think is kind of charming in hindsight, but at the time it felt like the book was just missing something. And in 2023, Skybound Entertainment, which is an imprint of Image Comics run by Robert Kirkman, the writer of Invincible and The Walking Dead, gained the Transformers license and began a new universe, which is titled the Energon Universe, or EU, though most people just call it Skybound. Transformers, written by Daniel Warren Johnson, has rocked the comic book charts, being a top-selling book to this day. If you're not a new fan from Transformers 1, you might be a new fan because of Skybound Transformers. I would say DWJ's run mixes the G1 aesthetic with the violence of the Bayverse, while adding DWJ's heartfelt storytelling and love of wrestling. If you're not reading it, you should read it. Finally, we have video games. Luckily, I was able to grow up with a bunch of cool video games like War for Cybertron, which reimagined the Transformers in this Xbox 360 era grimy look with the bulky bots that remind me of Gears of War, and it was followed up by Fall of Cybertron, which I've never played but many people love. And there's also Transformers Devastation, a game that feels like a lost chapter from the G1 series, but it also has badass combat that is so fun to play. Unfortunately, all of the games I've mentioned and many others have been delisted and are unavailable to buy online, so you need a disc to play them. And of course they don't make new copies anymore, so the secondhand market can get pricey. This is due to some sort of licensing issue that Hasbro needs to figure out. They are literally selling toys based on games that cannot legally be played. It's very bizarre, but the unfortunate reality. And current gaming offers from the franchise are incredibly weak. Transformers Reactivate, a game that was revealed in 2022, was cancelled after years of the community being excited for a new AAA Transformers game. What's super funny and sad about the situation is that Hasbro actually made toys based on the game designs. So not only have they made toys based on games you can't buy anymore, they also made toys based on a game you could never buy in the first place. Speaking of toys, I think it's time to move on. But if you have a question that wasn't answered here, please drop it in the comments because I'm sure somebody will answer it. The toys are so deeply important to the Transformers franchise. While I think the media is incredibly important as well and gets fans invested, a majority of online discussion and fandom is centered around the toys themselves. There's absolutely no way I could discuss every toy line in this one video. So we're going to take a very generalized approach here, and I'm going to discuss a few things, mostly based on questions I was getting when I asked new fans what they want to know. The first being, what toy lines even are there? Okay, so there are 3 main lines of Transformers toys right now. One of them is based on the Cyberworld cartoon and is aimed more towards kids. Fun toys, but Hasbro cut a lot of corners making them, so they don't even have basic articulation like elbows. The other 2 lines are more collector focused, first being Studio Series, which started out as a toy line covering all of the live action movies, basically making new versions of the characters that are scale accurate, have good articulation, articulation and can all go together, since past movie toy lines were different sizes, and featured different levels of accuracy to the movies. In 2021, Studio Series introduced a subline called Studio Series 86, which featured G1 Transformers from Transformers the Movie, the 1986 animated film. Many Bayverse fans were and are unhappy about this subline, because it does take slots in the toy line from potential Bayverse characters, but in my opinion, I think Hasbro realized they were running out of movie characters, and needed to extend the line until Rise of the Beasts came out, though I do agree they've been extremely slow to finish out the Bayverse cast, but SS86 is a great line in my opinion. Running concurrently with most toy lines over the years has been what fans call mainline or generations. In the 2000s, G1 was making a comeback in a big way, and new toys were designed based around G1, released without an accompanying movie or toy line. They were just toys for the sake of being toys. For a long time, fans called these toys CHUG, an acronym for Classics, Henkei, Universe, and Generations, which basically describe these new, unattached toys. And over the years, even more toy lines have been created, like the War for Cybertron trilogy that started with Siege, which moved into the Legacy line, and most recently the main line is called Age of the Primes. While the War for Cybertron toys had a TV show, that was kinda different, and the toy line didn't seem to revolve around the show. It was just something extra for the fans in my opinion. Mainline also started to incorporate universes outside of G1 with Legacy, featuring new toys based on characters from universes like Prime, Animated, Rescue Bots, and others, though some remakes are more faithful than others. The Armada remakes look pitch perfect to their original looks, while some characters are altered to fit the G1 aesthetic better, which I think is pretty bizarre. Age of the Primes is continuing this multiversal toy line. It doesn't have an actual story, but it does have an overall theme of the 13 Primes, which are the Greek gods of the Transformers universe. And the line is giving us a bunch of these characters for the first time. There is also a wide range of exclusives, ranging from actual stores like Target to online retailers like Hasbro Pulse themselves. Target, Walmart, and Amazon tend to get exclusive sublines of figures, while Hasbro Pulse usually gets convention exclusives. Speaking of retailers, the next question is, how do I get these freaking things? The distribution of the toys has been awful for many years, and in my experience, some stores are just dead zones that hardly get new stock at all. I've noticed Walmart in particular is terrible at stocking, and Target and especially GameStop seem to stock often. GameStop is weirdly a haven for new figures lately, though they do like to upcharge. The other option for getting new figures is online, either via Amazon, Hasbro Pulse, or another online store like Big Bad Toy Store. Personally, I just keep an eye on Amazon, as things will frequently and randomly restock, and you can also pre-order through these sites. Though I've seen many cases of Amazon just not sending pre-orders on the release date, or at all sometimes, so be wary of that. So really there's no solid way to get the toys, but hopefully some of these tips will help you out. I like the hunt and going out to find stuff, but if you never find anything, it can be really frustrating. One thing I do recommend though is going to toy stores. Toy stores won't usually have the latest toys, but they will usually have older toys not sold in stores anymore. Or if you're lucky, new toys that are out of the package, which are called loose figures for a discounted price. There is 40 years of Transformers toys to find and play with, and I really do encourage you to just grab something that looks interesting. And if you're not sure what it is, post it online and see if other fans can help, because they probably can. Instead of giving into FOMO and buying a new toy from a scalper, I recommend going to your local toy or comic shop and buying something different. There's a huge FOMO problem in the community, and it makes me sad to see fans paying for overpriced toys that were already overpriced. The next question is about what we call size classes, because these seem very difficult for new fans to grasp. Basically, almost every Transformers toy is assigned a size class. Our current classes are Deluxe, Voyager, Leader, Commander, and Titan class, which are all extremely vague names, and you could easily mix them up. So let's go through them. Deluxe is the current smallest size class, though in the past there was an even smaller class called Scout class, which was later renamed to Core class, but recently the smaller size was completely abandoned, so we don't have to worry about that for right now, the current toys. Deluxe is a bizarre name because deluxe usually means better than usual, whereas the deluxe class in Transformers kind of is the usual. Voyager class is a bit larger than deluxe. I have no clue what the word Voyager means in this context, but Voyagers are always the midpoint between a deluxe and leader class, while Leader class is sometimes larger, but is mostly hallmarked by more complex engineering. Leader class got that name because the characters would usually be leaders like Optimus or Megatron. Though this has changed over the years, and Leader class has just gone to whoever needs it based on their size or complexity. Commander class is somewhat new, introduced in 2019 with the War for Cybertron Siege. This size class is for larger characters that don't quite fit the Titan or Leader categories, like Jetfire, who is large but not gigantic. Though recently the class has become more flexible. Studio Series 86 Optimus Prime is a Commander class toy despite being arguably Voyager sized. He does come with his trailer and accessories, but I think the fandom largely agrees he's a Commander class because Hasbro knew people would buy it for that price. And most recently, the Commander class was used to release a 2-pack of Constructicons, as a way to pack in extra parts needed for combination, as well as getting the combiner set completed faster by using that release slot. So the Commander class is weird right now. And the Titan class is reserved for big guys like Scorponok and Metroplex, though they've gotten more creative, making transforming versions of the G1 Arc and Nemesis ships. But again, the most recent Titan is an outlier. Star Optimus Prime is actually smaller than usual Titans, and they did give him a price decrease as well, thankfully, but I'm still sure it's even more confusing to new fans. The best piece of advice I have is stop thinking of them as size classes and more like price classes. Prices are fluctuating as I'm making this, so I'll be vague, but at this point the size aspect has started not to matter, and the toys end up in certain classes due to their complexity. Again, I know it's annoying and confusing, and I kinda wish they just changed it to small, medium, large, but I guess that would be too simple. It really is something you just have to memorize if you care enough, and like most things, you'll start to remember these weird terms over time. Speaking of terminology, let's get into some toy terms, because besides classes, the random terminology is the most obviously confusing thing, and unlike classes, most toy terminology comes from the fandom. I'm just going to run through a list of terms and define them. Mold is a way to describe a specific Transformers toy. The term mold comes from the fact that plastic molds are used to make toys en masse. Most Transformers are unique molds, and they can be repainted and used as different characters, which I know can also be confusing for newer fans, because the Seekers, for example, all look the same because they're repaints of Starscream, and you have to match the name with the color. But again, that's something that just takes time to remember. Repaint is more of a fan term, but the official Hasbro term is redeco. Sometimes molds will be slightly altered. For example, the Conehead Seekers have a different head. This is a remold, and fans usually like remolds a bit more because they take more effort than repaints. And a synonym for remold is retool, as in Starscream was retooled into Ramjet. Mold degradation occurs when the mold is used too much. The joints and other parts can begin to degrade, leaving newer versions of an old mold as worse than the first version of the toy. Not many toys get to the point of mold degradation though, and it isn't really something you need to worry about often. Kibble is a term for pieces of the vehicle hanging off of a robot mode. Sometimes it's specified where the kibble exactly is, like back kibble or arm kibble. A similar term is backpack, referring to kibble on the back of a figure, though people mostly use backpack when there's a lot of kibble. And kibble is not necessarily bad, it just depends how much there is, if it restricts figure movement, etc. But calling something kibble is not inherently negative. Faux parts is a term describing fake parts on a Transformer. For example, Prime RID Cliffjumper's chest is fake, because it isn't actually made out of his car roof and bumper. His chest is just a molded piece designed to look like it is. Faux parts get a lot of hate in the fandom, simply because it feels like cheating to some fans. And transformations that don't use faux parts are usually more complex, which some fans value greatly. Personally, I understand the use of faux parts and don't really mind it. Some designs like the Bayverse and Prime ones often need faux parts to accomplish the complicated designs. Parts forming is a similar term, meaning that you have to take pieces off and rearrange them to complete a transformation. I understand not liking this one more, especially if the entire transformation is parts forming, but some people even hate when just some of the Transformer requires parts forming, which I don't really mind, to be honest. Shell formers are transformers who mostly store their robot bits in a plastic shell, and the shell is usually the vehicle they turn into. For example, Cybertron Thunderblast, who hides most of her body in a shell that makes up the bottom of her boat form. Not all shell formers are bad though, but like I said, complexity tends to have a bigger value in the fandom than anything else, and shell formers are considered on the low end of complexity. Gold Plastic Syndrome, or GPS, refers to an issue where older Transformers toys would begin to fall apart after a few years. Gold plastic was the most common, but this plastic can actually be any color. It's more about the kind of plastic, so GPS is kind of a dumb name, but that's what we use and that's what everyone understands. This isn't really a modern day issue at all, but when buying old figures, you should check the TF Wiki figure description just in case, because they will mention if the figure has GPS. It's not crazy common, but any pre-2015 figure you're not sure about, I would look it up. And if you're collecting vintage G1, I would be especially careful. Speaking of, vintage refers to the original releases of old toys. I think the rule of thumb for a toy is that it must be 20 years old to be considered vintage, but feel free to correct me on that. We mostly use vintage because of another term, reissue, which can be used two ways. The first is referring to a remake of an old toy. For example, there are a lot of G1 reissues that have come out over the years, and while they're usually faithful remakes, some things do tend to change. And some G1 collectors would prefer vintage over a reissue, because vintage is more authentic. The other way reissue is used is much more direct. Some toys just come out again. Same packaging, same paint, no changes, just once again issued out. Greebling is small details added onto a mold. Usually they're little bits of circuitry, and are just there to add a bit of texture to the toy. Some toys have a lot of greebling, while others don't in an effort to look more toon accurate, toon being short for cartoon in this instance. Gorilla Arms is an affliction where a Transformer can only bend its arms inwards, with no traditional outward arm bend, making it look awkward. On sort of the same wavelength as GPS, toys with clear plastic should be handled carefully. They won't naturally crumble to dust like GPS plastic, but they certainly can break more easily, especially if the clear plastic is used for joints, like on Animated Swindle, whose arms and legs are made of clear plastic, and unfortunately break a lot. I will stress that clear plastic isn't always bad though. It mostly comes down to opinion on whether it's a good thing or bad thing. Some people want painted windows because you can see the robot parts through the plastic, but I personally don't mind. I like the look of clear plastic. And I also like light piping, which is a gimmick where they put some translucent plastic in the head of a Transformer, and if you shine a light through the back, the eyes will appear to glow, with varying degrees of success. I personally love the gimmick because I think it looks cool, but plenty of fans hate it because it does detract from screen accuracy, and the light piping effect isn't always strong or sometimes doesn't even work. But light piping is very uncommon now anyway. You see it way more in figures from the 2000s. There are probably 100 more terms, but hopefully this is some good starter terminology to help you get more invested in toy conversations. Because past the is it good or bad phase of toy discussion, a lot of it is talking about details. Like, is it a good repaint? Was the toy retooled from another figure? Is the bat kibble out of control? Does it have any parts forming? These are all very real topics of conversation for toy fans. And once you acclimate to the terminology, learning about Transformers toy history is very fun and interesting. It's what I base my channel around after all. There is a lot that I have not touched on for media and toys, Japanese media and toys being a huge hole here, mostly because I am completely uninformed. I definitely plan to dive into the Japanese side of the fandom at some point in my life, but I don't want to mislead or be totally incorrect about anything. I'll say this though, the Japanese side of Transformers is just as important as the English side. And since the original Transformers toys were reused Japanese toys, I believe Japan is intrinsically tied into the franchise and should be respected as such. Another huge thing I am not equipped to talk about is third-party toys. Third-party toys are essentially Transformers that are not made by Hasbro or Takara, but a different company that does not have licensing rights to the characters. So they're technically stealing the character designs and making their own unique toys based on them. This is obviously illegal, but it seems not to be worth it to Hasbro to go after these companies. So third-party toys have flourished, and many fans collect both official and third-party, or just third-party in some cases. These companies feign trying not to violate copyright by not using copyrighted material like insignias or names, But come on, that's obviously Soundwave. I think most fans are fine with third party. It offers variety as well as quality and complexity that Hasbro's toys simply don't provide. But again, this is very surface level information. The last piece of the Transformers franchise I would like to highlight is the fandom. Fandom is important to any franchise, and Transformers has it in spades. There are tons of ways to interact with the fandom. Though most of it is online, there are conventions centered around Transformers, like TFCon. I actually got to go to the most recent TFCon in Chicago, and it was so amazing. I did a whole video on it, but long story short, it was incredible to be there in person with so many like-minded fans. It's really an experience I've never had before, and I can't wait to do it again. In terms of online resources for the fandom, TFW 2005 is my #1 website for Transformers news. I've been using the website for as long as I've been on the internet, and they report on official toy and media news, as well as auxiliary product and third-party news. I would pretty much trust this website with my life, though I don't use the forums. I've always used Twitter to connect with others in the fandom, though I will say it helps to be a somewhat well-known YouTuber when making friends, but it's totally possible to do it as a new person as well. I do want to say that Twitter is one of the worst social medias of all time. The website just rage baits the hell out of you, because people with Twitter Premium are trying to farm money out of rage bait interactions. I'm only mentioning the website because I do think it's a great way to meet people, but try and curate your feed, and don't use the For You tab, that's rage bait central. Use the following tab, and try to join a Transformers community. TF Hype Guy, 60, and the Crazy Ass TF Moments pages are all great accounts for news and community discussion. Or just get constantly rage baited, I don't care, I'm not the cops. I know there are big Transformers communities on Tumblr and AO3, but I genuinely do not understand how to use those websites. I'm either too old or too dumb, probably both. But you can use the hashtag McAdams to find Transformers content on pretty much any website. It's a special hashtag used by fans and especially artists to find each other. The hashtag is called McAdams because in the Cyberverse cartoon, there's a bar run by a character named McAdam, and it is the only neutral zone during the Cybertronian Civil War. Discord is another great way to meet other fans. Many big names in the Transformer space have a Discord server to discuss Transformers. My only thing though is that you really need to be careful on Discord. It can be a dangerous program, especially if you're younger. So if you join one of these servers, be cautious when someone tries to private message you. I would advise you to try and keep your conversations on the public Discord itself, and try to keep personal information personal. My biggest fear is that the USA's education system is so broken that kids are not being taught proper cybersecurity. Sorry to go on a tangent, but I've read way too many Discord horror stories. Just be safe and try to have positive interactions. And if anyone is a creep to you, get screenshots and leave the server or block them. Sorry about the slight heaviness of that topic, let's move on. I do want to stress that the great thing about the Transformers fandom is the creative power the franchise gives you. Fanfiction and fan alternate universes, or AUs, are extremely popular in the fandom, and pretty much everyone has one. Even I was working on one earlier this year with my channel artist Reggie, who you should commission by the way, centipede.gov on Instagram. And even big names in the franchise, like comic book writer James Roberts, have written fanfiction. James wrote so much he published it as a tome called Eugenesis, and years later he would work on the incredibly popular IDW run of Transformers. So never let anyone tell you fanfiction is a waste of time. Okay, let's get to my personal favorite stuff, YouTube channels. My participation in the fandom by and large has been through YouTube. I grew up watching a guy named Pia, who was the first person I saw reviewing Transformers animated toys. But since then, Transformers YouTube has exploded, and there are so many YouTubers that I couldn't possibly mention them all, and I likely won't mention your favorites. But remember, this is just a guide to get your foot in the door, and I do encourage you to check out random channels you see. But for starters, I've got 4 categories of YouTubers: crowd favorites, reviewers, lore, and news/variety. But to be clear, I think all of these channels are great, and I have massive respect for each of them. For the crowd favorites selection, we of course have Thew Adams, a Transformers reviewer known for his clever wordplay, energetic reviews, and love of metal music. Chris McFeely is a fantastic Transformers YouTuber for a new fan, because he's known for his series called The Basics, which are videos discussing the very basics on Transformers characters and concepts. Perfect for a new fan. Jobby the Hong is a well-known toy reviewer. He's mainly known for his third-party Transformers reviews. I will say his channel's more PG-13, so keep that in mind. design. And you might have briefly heard his voice in The Amazing Digital Circus, because he plays Disappearing Guy. I'm putting Diamond Bolt in the crowd favorite section. He basically makes one Transformers video a year, but they're always funny and a point of discussion in the community. The next section is reviewers, who in my opinion are the foundation of Transformers YouTube, and I have great respect for those who sit behind a camera and talk about toys. It seems easy, but in my opinion, it's super hard to be engaging, much less capture an audience these days with so many others doing the same. Let's start with the true OG MGO316. This dude has been at it for many years, and always has a fair and balanced attitude towards the toy he's reviewing. He also makes videos where he shows off how to transform a toy, and watching an MGO video when you're stuck on a transformation is almost a fan rite of passage. That toy guy is one of the most popular reviewers on the platform currently, and is able to make super engaging videos within the reviewing format, by using simple but clever editing to make the video more kinetic, and giving background info on the toy, making his videos more accessible to new fans. Dr. Lockdown is personally one of my favorite creators. He makes long, detailed videos on Transformers products ranging from official to third party, and he shares my love of small Transformers, which are called legend size by the fans. Dr. Lockdown can make an hour-and-a-half review of one combiner, and I will listen to every word, because he truly fills his reviews with interesting ideas. He's not just wasting your time. It's a truly analytical toy review, which feels unique. Papermelon is another completely unique reviewer. I would honestly call him more of a filmmaker. He always puts a ton of effort towards his videos, and they are extremely cinematic and visually interesting. He covers a good combination of official and third-party Transformers. The next set of YouTubers cover lore, or just media in general instead of solely focusing on toys. Commodon Cam does a lot of ranking videos. He also has some great videos covering Transformers 1, and he has a deep love for the Transformers War for Cybertron games. Theorymus makes in-depth videos covering the live-action Transformers movies. I think his videos are super unique, and cover a lot of fine details that the movies themselves don't bother to explain. Paperplane TF is a very funny YouTuber who covers pretty much anything and everything in the fandom, and always offers an interesting idea or perspective. Delta Tryon is one of my first YouTube friends. He started to gain traction around the same time as me, covering the Skybound Transformers comic books, talking about character arcs and giving his takes on the story. You might know Kian Carlisle as a YouTuber that covers Disney Channel original shows, but he's also a big name in the Transformers community. He is essentially a Transformers animated historian, and he's even worked with the original show creators to make bespoke fan comics based on the cancelled season 4. Truly incredible work to a fan of animated like me. Nothing but respect for the dude. The final set of YouTubers I'm calling news/variety, and they're all kind of oddballs in the community, but I love them. T-Fan Page 101 does a lot of different content, mostly covering news and reviewing Transformers in his own very unique style. TJ Omega has been doing daily uploads, mostly covering Transformers for like 2 years straight, if not longer. The dude is a maniac for that, but he's been an OG for a long time. I personally know him from his angry video game nerd-esque YouTube series called Plastic Addict, which is pretty old these days, but I have really fond memories of it. He has a perfect channel for someone who wants daily content. Vangelis is one of the most interesting Transformers YouTubers out there. I found him many years ago and became an avid watcher thanks to his super interesting take on Transformers reviews, which were way ahead of their time. Vangelis was not only entertaining, but he also had an ongoing feud with the snarky subtitles that appear in all of his reviews. Student Scissors is a newer creator I've become familiar with. He makes videos about Transformers that he's made out of Lego, and some of his original designs are so awesome. And his content really takes me back to the early days of YouTube, because I was always watching Lego Transformers videos, and I even made a few of my own. That's it for the YouTuber section. Like I said, this list is just scratching the surface, but I hope you can find one person you like in this list and can branch off from there. Okay, this has been the Dumb Jake Transformers Survival Guide, which I had a ton of fun writing, and I hope the video was enjoyable as well as understandable. When I put out the call for questions from new fans, I got a lot of questions about lore in the Transformers universe, and like I said, most universes are disconnected, so the lore differs from universe to universe, and I once again encourage you to use the TF Wiki to learn about this stuff. It can be really fun to just dive down rabbit holes on the website, and I think it is truly the best resource that Transformers fans have. So many fandoms have half-baked fandom wikis that don't cover the topic in depth, and Transformers fans are literally so spoiled by TF Wiki, it's awesome. Alright y'all, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing, and if you'd like to support support me further, I have a YouTube channel and Patreon. For $1 a month, both give you access to the same thing. Access to my super chill Discord server where we talk about toys daily, and you also get weekly member exclusive videos called Toy Dives, where I take a look at random toy lines I find interesting, like the Biker Mice from Mars, a bizarre Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles clone from the 90s. Also, I have merch. I'm terrible at advertising it, but I think it's really cool. It's getting colder now, so stay warm in style with the Dumb Jake hoodie. Alright y'all, I'll see you in the next one. Ciao.